Tonight, when you crack open a cold drink after a long day, you're not doing anything new. No farms yet, no writing yet, no wheels yet, just fire, hunger, and something stranger. Because 13,000 years before the first city, someone in a dark cave was already making alcohol on purpose. And the reason your body can even handle a drink today goes back 10 million years, long before humans existed. This is the strange, surprising story of how your ancestors discovered alcohol and why it might have quietly built civilization itself. 10 million years ago, in the forests of Africa, there were no bars, no breweries, no bottles. Just fruit falling from the trees, splitting open on the ground, and slowly turning soft in the heat. Fallen fruit ferments fast. Wild yeast lands on it, eats the sugar, and leaves alcohol behind, whether anyone wants it or not. For most animals wandering that forest floor, that alcohol was simply poison. Too much, and the body shut down completely. But somewhere among those trees, one of your ancestors carried a tiny genetic accident, invisible, silent, and about to change everything that came after. In a study published in late 2014, biologist Matthew Kerrigan found a single mutation in an enzyme called ADH4. That one mutation made the enzyme 40 times more efficient at breaking alcohol down into something the body could actually use as food. Suddenly, fermented fruit wasn't poison anymore. It was extra calories nobody else in the forest could reach. The primates who carried this mutation could safely eat fruit that every other animal around them had to leave rotting on the ground. Robert Dudley, a biologist at UC Berkeley, has a name for this. He calls it the drunken monkey hypothesis. In a 2014 book arguing our attraction to alcohol is a leftover survival advantage, not a modern weakness. Then versus you, your ancestors weren't looking to get drunk. They were looking for calories nobody else could find. Getting drunk was just the accidental side effect. You don't have to look far to see this same instinct still playing out today. In the rainforests of Malaysia lives a creature smaller than your hand, the pin-tailed treeshrew. Every single night, it drinks the naturally fermented nectar of the burden palm, alcohol content close to 4%, roughly the strength of a light beer. Scientists calculated it drinks the equivalent of 10 to 12 glasses of wine every single night of its life. And it never once acts drunk. Its tiny body has learned to burn the alcohol before it ever reaches its brain. Chimpanzees do something even closer to what you might recognize from a Friday night. In the forests of Basso, in Guinea, researchers filmed wild chimpanzees dipping leaves into containers of fermented palm sap and sucking out the liquid like a makeshift sponge. Some of that sap reached almost 7% alcohol, closer to wine than beer. And some of the chimpanzees, researchers noted, showed clear signs of being drunk. Resting, slowing down, losing all interest in anything else around them. Then versus you, swap the leaf sponge for a straw, and it's basically the same scene you might see at any party this weekend. So the taste for alcohol is ancient, older than humans, older than language itself. But somewhere, someone stopped waiting for fruit to fall on its own and started making alcohol on purpose. That moment happened earlier than almost anyone expects. In a cave called Raqefet, near modern-day Haifa in Israel, archaeologists found stone mortars carved directly into the cave floor. Inside them, 13,000-year-old starch residue from wheat and barley, deliberately soaked, mashed, and left to ferment in the dark. This was the work of the Natufian people, hunter-gatherers who hadn't even invented farming yet. Li Lu, an archaeologist at Stanford University, led the team that confirmed it in 2018. It remains the oldest known evidence of deliberate beer brewing anywhere on Earth. Then versus you, they figured out how to brew beer before they figured out how to grow the very grain it was made from. And it gets stranger because beer may not have simply followed civilization. It may have helped build it. At a site called Göbekli Tepe, in what is now Turkey, Archaeologists found massive stone pillars carved 11,000 years ago. This was before agriculture, before pottery, before a single permanent village existed anywhere nearby. Building something that size took hundreds of workers, and workers who build together for weeks at a time need to eat and drink together too. Inside huge stone troughs at the site, researchers found residue consistent with fermented grain, beer, brewed in enormous batches for a crowd. Archaeologist Oliver Dietrich, who led the analysis in 2012, argued that beer wasn't just a reward for building civilization. It may have been the very reason people were willing to gather and build in the first place. Then versus you. The drink you reach for to unwind after a long week might be an old invention. It once talked total strangers into working side by side for the very first time in history. That idea isn't just one archaeologist's theory anymore. Edward Slingerland, a philosopher who studies human cognition, spent an entire 2021 book arguing something similar. Getting mildly intoxicated together, he says, may have quietly solved one of our species' hardest problems. Fiercely tribal, suspicious primates needed some way to lower their guard around total strangers, to cooperate, trade, and build something bigger than one family or one tribe. A shared drink, passed hand to hand, may have been one of the simplest tools our ancestors had for building that trust. Then versus you. The awkward small talk over drinks at a party tonight is doing the exact same social job it did 11,000 years ago at Göbekli Tepe. 2,000 years later, on the other side of the world, people in the village of Jiahu, in China, were fermenting something even stranger in their pottery. Chemist Patrick McGovern of the University of Pennsylvania Museum analyzed residue sealed inside 9,000-year-old jars and found rice, honey, and hawthorn fruit, all fermented together into one single drink. Not quite beer, not quite wine, not quite mead. Somehow, all three at once, in the same clay jar. Then versus you. Your ancestors were already mixing elaborate drinks 9,000 years before the first cocktail bar ever opened its doors. By the time we reach ancient Sumer, alcohol wasn't rare or ceremonial anymore. It was everywhere, and it may have been safer to drink than the water. Rivers running near those early cities were often contaminated by waste, animals, and disease. Beer, boiled and fermented, killed off many of the microbes that made plain water dangerous to drink. It looked nothing like the beer you know today. It was thick, cloudy, and full of floating grain, closer to a liquid porridge than a clear drink. So the Sumerians drank it through long straws, sipping the liquid from the top of one shared communal jar, while the sediment stayed sensibly at the bottom. They even wrote a hymn to Ninkasi, their goddess of beer. Its brewing instructions were so precise that modern brewers have used that very poem to recreate the recipe, nearly 4,000 years later. Then versus you, raising a glass with friends tonight is a tradition at least 6,000 years old. You're just holding a much smaller cup and skipping straw. And here's the part that might make you feel a little better about tomorrow morning. Your ancestors got hangovers too, and they were already trying to cure them badly. One ancient Egyptian papyrus, nearly 1,900 years old, recommends stringing leaves from a shrub into a necklace and wearing it around your neck to cure a drunken headache. An even older Mesopotamian text prescribes a strange morning mixture of licorice and beans to be swallowed before sunrise and, very specifically, before anyone kisses you. Then versus you. Your ancestors were reaching for questionable home remedies for the exact same regret you feel reaching for water and painkillers this morning. So the next time you crack open a drink, take a second and actually look at what's in your glass. 10 million years of a tiny genetic accident that let your ancestors eat what every other animal around them physically couldn't. 13,000 years since someone kneeling in a cave decided to brew it on purpose for the very first time in human history. 11,000 years since that same drink may have convinced total strangers to build the first monuments together, stone by stone, side by side. In thousands of years of straws, hymns, hangovers, and shared communal jars, all leading quietly to the drink sitting in your hand right now, tonight. You didn't invent the taste for alcohol. You inherited it, passed down through a chain of ancestors going back further than agriculture, further than cities, further than humans themselves. Same human, different world. If this made you look at your next drink a little differently, tell us in the comments. What would you ask Nock if you ever shared a cup with him around the fire? And if you want the next chapter of what it really felt like to be human before any of this was normal, you already know where to click next.